Okay, we are class 9 of the Golden Doves. In the introduction, page Roman numeral 14, top of the page, the preceding is especially relevant, especially pertinent for the scholar examining something as complex as rabbinic literature. So let me explain to you what it means by the preceding. The preceding being the idea that there is no naked reading of a text, right? There is no objective reading of a culture, of a people, right? As opposed to the scientific study of Judaism, which said that we can have objective criteria through which to examine any culture in any nation. And the conflicting idea is what he's referring to. And so when you're studying rabbinic literature, which is something belonging to a different historical period, right? Like, for example, we just discussed what does the word bayit mean in rabbinic thinking. It doesn't mean the same thing that it means in today, and produced in a linguistic and cultural environment, presupposing a cultural and hermeneutic code radically different from those of the modern investigator. So their very ways of thinking were different, right? So in my previous video, I examined the derashot of the Chachamim, and I showed that from the perspective of Western thinking, those types of derashot don't have an internal logic to them. But once you understand that from the perspective of structuralist thinking, they're actually very logical and very reasonable. So that's why, and that's what this book is going to do. This book is going to serve as a bridge between our culture and the culture of the Chachamim. So Chavot, read.
Linguistics is particularly significant for the proper understanding of the axes present in rabbinic tradition.
Right. So we have linguistics, the study of language, and the study of language, the way Ferdinandus Saussure studied language, is useful for us to understand Masoret Hazal, and we're going to see how.
Ferdinandus Saussure, the father of modern linguistics, observed that all sciences concerned with the system of values, for example, economics, linguistics, can be studied either diachronically or synchronically.
Right, and that's a great chidush of Saussure, and I'll give you an example. I can study mathematics. I want to get you a book on mathematics. I can get you a book on the history of mathematics, how the Egyptians made calculations, how the Persians made calculations, how the Greeks did it, how the Romans did it, Arabic numerals. That's not really the study of mathematics. That's a study of the history of mathematics. Or we can study it, that's diachronically. Or we can study it synchronically, which is now. What do we know about math today? What is math about? That's a whole system, right?
In linguistics, diachrony corresponds to the vertical axis of language.
Right, there's a vertical axis of language. If you ever listen to the way English was spoken in the days of Shakespeare, it was different than the way English is spoken today. So there's an evolution over the course of time in language. That's called the vertical axis.
It is concerned with the evolution and development of individual elements as they unfold successively through time.
Right. So, for example, I think the word girl used to mean at one point meant a good-looking young boy, right? So that's an example of how the word evolves and develops and meanings change. Or the word gay. But today the word gay means, particular sexual inclination. Whereas, back then the word gay meant almost exclusively, I am gay, meant I'm just happy. Right? So you see that words develop over time, the meaning of words develop over time. That's called the diachronic axis.
Mm-hmm. Synchrony corresponds to the horizontal axis of language.
Right.
It is concerned with the static aspect of language at any one time. All those logical and psychological factors that bind together coexisting terms and form a system in a collective mind of the speaker.
Right. So how do we speak English today? And so that's a whole system. It's like an ocean. And this ocean, there are things that bind together the different terms. That's called structuralism, because there's grammatical structures, there's syntactical structures, and most importantly, there's psychological factors. For example, if I see a person of color, I would, God forbid, I wouldn't call them, what they used to call people of color back then. I won't even say it. But then a few years ago in the 90s, they used to call people of color African American. That's considered insulting to them. So I wouldn't say that either. Today you call them black. So you see, there's psychological factors that that motivate us in the way we speak. We're very careful what we say and how we say it. Those are the psychological factors, right? So there's a rules, grammatical rules, linguistic rules, more what is a proper morphology? How do I build a sentence? But there's also psychological things. I won't say anything. I would never use the word white power, God forbid, because white power is a bad concept, and we don't want to say bad things. So even if I meant something completely, innocuous, I would never use that term. That's a psychological factor, right?
Each of these axes is absolutely independent of the other. A diachronic fact is an independent event. The particular synchronic consequence that may stem from it are wholly unrelated to it. That is something I every time I read it, I don't fully understand.
Yeah. The fact, okay, let me give you an example. I tell you, John is gay.
Mm-hmm.
And you say, oh, Dad, you mean he's happy? I said, Joey, I said he's gay. No, I mean that he has a particular, inclination. So he said, Daddy, but yes, but, and then you take out a book. You take out an old book, English book, where the word gay is used in the sense of happy. The point of Ferdinand de Saussure is that is completely irrelevant. The way language is used today, it is an independent system, and the fact that historically it meant something else is irrelevant to the fact that today it is used as it is used, right? That's so important. So for example, I explain to you a particular thing in calculus. And you say, yeah, but Daddy, look, the inventor of calculus approached the problem this way. It's irrelevant what they thought and how they approached it. What's important is that and that's why the two axes are independent, right? The two axes are completely independent. So the system of language we have today works perfectly, and you don't need to know that this word meant that, and originally the other sentence would have meant that. It's irrelevant.
Mm-hmm.
Independent system. This ocean exists before us today.
Consider, for example, the French negation pas. The fact that it is historically identical to the substantive step is in no way relevant to its current use and application. Pa means like, right, not, or no, not.
Right. So the fact that in French, pas, I don't know how to pronounce it.
Pa.
Okay, it means not this, right? It doesn't matter that at some point in time it meant something else, irrelevant, right? So if I go to France and I want to be clever and I want to show how smart I am, and I start telling people yes, but originally in ancient French it meant that, like they're like, le buffoon, like who the heck cares? Like what you think about, what ancient French did? It's not a factor.
Mm-hmm.
Whether they do this a lot in the study of Bible. A lot of times they'll tell you, yes, in Ugaritic, the word meant this. They do that a lot in Bible studies in universities. They tell you, yes, this word in Akkadian had the following meaning. That's irrelevant. You cannot impose the diachronic access upon the synchronic access. The Torah is a living system, and the words in the Torah exist independently of the historical origin of those words. So a lot of these academic studies of Bible, they run roughshod over linguistic theory of language, which is the accepted theory of language of Ferdinand de Saussure, which just separates the diachronic access from the synchronic access.
One need not know the history of garage, automobile, and mechanic to use these terms properly.
Yes.
1 second, Mehila.
Please.
Pause it for a second.
Yes, please. I'm pausing. Okay, so let us continue. Right, so you don't need to know the history of the word garage. What is the history of the word garage in order to use the word garage, right? I don't need to know the history of the word bagel. Where does the word bagel come from, right? I just want a bagel, okay? That's all.
Yes. In the same manner, one does not need to know the history of economics to be a competent stock analyst, investment broker, or banker.
Exactly. I can be a great banker and not know the history of the U.S. banking system. I just want to, just tell me how the banking system works now, and I'm in.
We do not learn about synchronic states by studying diachronic events, any more than we learn about the geometric projections by studying even carefully the different types of bodies.
Right. So a point that Ferdinand de Saussure, if you want to know synchronically what is the meaning of an element in a particular system, whether it's economics, whether it's mathematical, whether it's a scientific or linguistic, you're not going to know the elements just by looking at the diachronic evolution of that element over the course of time, any more than we learn about geometric projections by studying the different types of bodies. What does that mean? You want to look at the footnote for a moment? What does that mean? Geometric projections. So geometric projection. Let's say
Yes.
you have a particular projection on the wall. Let's say there's a shadow of a circle on the wall, for example. That's an actual projection on the wall. Okay. Or let's say there's a circular image on the wall, a triangular image on the wall. It's a triangle. Okay, for example. I'm not going to learn about whether that's a circle and that's a triangle and what is the correct mathematical area of the geometric area of the triangle or circle just by studying the different types of the different types of geometrical bodies that there are. I'm looking at these projections. What are these projections, right? That's what Ferdinand de Saussure was saying.
There is a radical absolute opposition between these two axes.
Or
One
mechila,
consequence.
or perhaps I'm so sorry. Or maybe what he means is that you have I have to look at the original language of Ferdinand de Saussure, and I don't have it with me now. I want to look at it because I want to understand the sentence better. So rather than speculate, let's just go on, and then I'll have a follow-up video maybe explaining the sentence in a more precise way. Go ahead. There is a radical absolute opposition
Between these two axes. One consequence of the radical antinomy between the evolutionary and the static fact is that all notions associated with one or the other are the same extent, mutually irreducible.
Right. So you cannot reduce a historical fact to a current usage. Those things are, again, mutually exclusive, not just irrelevant, but if you're not going to bring history into the understanding of words, you wouldn't understand a single sentence because that's not the way language works.
Mm-hmm. Accordingly, when considering a subject from one of its axes, we must suppress the notions associated with the other. Right.
Yeah.
The first thing that strikes us when we study the facts of language is that their succession in time does not exist insofar as the speaker is concerned.
Yeah, so when a person is speaking a sentence, the history of the words used in the sentence completely do not exist in the speaker's mind.
That is, he is confronted with a state. That is why the linguist who wishes to understand the state must discard all knowledge of everything that produced it and ignore diachrony.
Right.
Can enter the mind of the speakers only by completely suppressing the past.
Yes.
I'm going to finish that. The intervention of history can only falsify his judgment.
Right. So, for example, somebody says, why was the word Elohim used to describe God? So they say, well, the word Elohim is in plural form, and originally it's plural form, and it meant a multiplicity. It's completely irrelevant.
I never heard that. I never heard that pirush.
Right. No, I'm saying no. They that's a question they ask. That's a question they ask. Right? It's irrelevant.
Oh,
right. In other words, they ask the question, why do we use
yeah.
the word Elohim?
Yeah, that I understood. Yeah.
Which is plural form of, and the answer is, it's irrelevant. Whatever the historical development, today, the word Elohim refers to the one God of Israel. And every single Jew in every single place on the planet, when he says the word Elohim, he's referring to the one God of Israel. You think that historically the word Elohim implied a multiplicity of gods? Whoopsie doodah to you. I mean, like, who really cares what you think about history and whether it's even true? Let's even say that the word Elohim at some point in time implied a multiplicity of beings. Okay, all right, great. I can live with that. It's an irrelevant fact. Because as Ferdinand de Saussure says, the two axes are mutually irreducible to each other. It's such an incredible point because you just smashed so much of the biblical academic studies in the universities that they are so hypocritical because they'll teach general linguistics of Ferdinand de Saussure and they'll completely ignore the general linguistics of Ferdinand de Saussure in every single field except biblical studies. Somehow in biblical studies, it doesn't exist. In any other literature, yes, we have Ferdinand de Saussure, just not in the Bible. Please.
The application of values and notions from one axis to the other may result in faulty methodology and confusion.
Yes.
Comparative.
I actually have a footnote here. The poor biblical critics were, I think the word I hear is, or are morons. Okay, I'm sorry. I was young and I was very rude back then, so I apologize. I didn't mean to be rude, but that's what I was writing when I must have run this footnote literally 30 years ago. Okay, go ahead.
Comparative philology as initiated in Germany by Franz Bopp, was faulty precisely because it did not come to grips with this fundamental opposition of these axes. Right. In this regard,
right, he wanted to try to study the real meaning of words, and he would go into the history of the words to show what the word really means. Okay.
In this regard, traditional grammars concerned with the static aspect of language and its synchronic axis were better defined and more free from ambiguity and confusion.
Yes.
Classical grammar has been criticized as unscientific. Still, its basis is less open to criticism, and its data are better defined than are those of the linguistics started by Bopp. The latter, occupying ill-defined ground, has no clear-cut objective. It straddles two areas because it is unable to make a sharp distinction between states and succession.
Right, and one of the
states
things
being
the synchronic access.
Synchronic, and succession is the diachronic.
Exactly, and one of the things that Dikduk, the study of Dikduk brings us the rules as they're used today. These are the rules. It's always on the synchronic access. And you say, wait, but I have a text where they use the word differently, and this is how they used it. And it doesn't matter, because the study of Dikduk is looking at the usage of language today, synchronically. That's really important.
Continue?
Yes, please.
Rabbinic authority comprises three fundamental institutions. One,
okay, so let's stop here. Great, Mechila. This is a really good place to stop because it's a new subject. But I love this chidush of Ferdinand de Saussure because it's so important for every Jew to know this. Because if you don't know this, you're open to ludicrous types of criticism against the Bible and against the Ma'amanim of the Chazal and the Gemara and against Judaism, because if you don't know this, then they're always going to attack you. They'll bring the ayot from the diachronic aspect to the synchronic axis and vice versa. And they do what this guy Franz Bopp did in Germany. They just make one big chulin, which is tasteless and meaningless. And that's not what we want.
Yes.
Okay.